So hi everybody, I'm Noam. There's several familiar faces here. Some even live not far away from where I am. Some I haven't seen for almost 20 years. And some I've seen just this week. So it's really fun to see all you guys. I saw in the groups that you were asking yourself about Angular and about how to do things in Angular, and I decided to do an Angular tutorial based on the experience that I gathered in the several years where I'm doing Angular apps.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, anyone who can open a camera, I would really appreciate it because it's much more fun to speak to faces. I'll start with a brief apology. I'll probably exceed the hours that I had planned because really I just wanted to put to try to complete a complete application in the times that we have, so it might take more than an hour. Feel free to jump in, ask questions, throw things at me. Just a bit of background for those of you who don't know me. I'm a Magic developer since 1995, which is 26 and a half years ago. Started with the best version of Magic yet, 4.2, and moved up. Later, I've done a lot of .NET. And the last few years, I've done a lot of Angular and a lot of TypeScript. I had the privilege of being part of open source projects in the web world and in the crisis aid world, let's say, which was a lot of fun. And I had gained my Angular experience there. So all of you know what Angular is, I'm guessing, but I'm going to try and start from pretty much scratch. You know, like we have a machine, nothing is installed. How can we start? Which actually reminds me that I need to restructure my screen so I can see you and see my notes at the same time. So just a sec. Okay, so the end game of our meeting today, where I want to be when we're done, is to have a to-do app just like this one, available, deployed in production on the web that you can use. Okay, this is an Angular-based application. It has 2 pages, home, that works, and to-do. It has the ability to add a task and to check it if it's done or not. It is saving the data, so if I refresh, the data is still here. And I can delete tasks that I don't want to keep. And that's the rough UI that I want to get to also, because I wanted to make this as close to a real project as one possibly can. So I'm gonna use split screen a lot. I hope you can have you can deal with my split personality. So the first thing we do when we want to work with Angular, we go to the Angular site, and then we move on to the CLI site. And to install Angular on our machine, we first need to install NPM and VS Code. Do all of you know what that is, or do you want me to share links or how to get that?
No, I know what it is.
All you, sorry, I didn't get that.
I think we know what it is, NPM.
Okay, perfect. So just, I'm going to add some links later so everybody can reach them. This is a small article I've written a while ago about how to install a dev machine, which means we need Node.js, that you know what it is, Git, which we all know and love, and Visual Studio Code, which is the tools that we're going to use to write the code. So the first thing we want to do is to install Angular. So we're going to copy this line, paste it here, and it will install Angular. Of course, my machine already has that, so that would start pretty easily. And we are installing the Angular CLI. CLI stands for Command Line Interface. It's basically a utility that helps us do things, okay? So the first thing I want to ask you to do is to build a project. So I'm going to say ng-new Angular intro, which means I'm asking the Angular command line tool to create a new project called Angular intro. I would like to have routing. Yes, I would. And I would like to use CSS. So this CLI tool, you remember those days back in the day? So we came back to those. But this CLI tool actually generates a lot of boilerplate code that I just don't want to handle. There's a lot of configuration things, there are a lot of things running here, best practices that we just don't want to know about when we're developing an app. We just want to get started with our code. And the CLI utility by Angular takes care of that for us. So he's written all of these files and he installs whatever we need installed. And hopefully we'll be done soon and we'll be able to jump into our project. Cool. So there we have the Angular intro folder. We're going to step into it and we're going to run VS Code by clicking code dot. code space dot, and it will start VS Code. Okay, now, as you've mentioned, I'm guessing all of you are familiar with it, but I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to turn on this flag, which means that you will see the shortcuts that I type, which hopefully will make this easier to follow. So we've done that, and let's explain, let's do a few more things. We're using Git here. How many of you use Git today? Okay, perfect. Some of you don't use Git. Okay, cool. So just a few words. Git is a version control tool that allow multiple people to work on the same code base with ease and makes life actually great. So whenever we make a change or several changes to files, we save those and commit them to Git as a change set. Okay. For example, I'm going to take the README file over here and I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to replace it with my agenda for today. So hopefully I'll be able to keep. So if I look at this icon in Visual Studio Code, it shows me, hey, you've changed the README file. Okay. And I will commit a change. I will say, okay, I changed the README file. Okay. So it committed a change transaction to my code. It can involve one or more files, and it saves those to my source control tool. Now I can publish the source control to the cloud, which I'm going to do now. I'm going to call it Angular intro, and I'm going to deploy it to GitHub as a public repository. The reason that I'm doing that is that the code will be available to all of you just about now. So when I'm going to say open on GitHub, it will open GitHub, and we'll have both the agenda that we've defined and the codes that we're going to go work on over here. And we'll be able to circle back to that whenever you want. You can open another browser and just go to this URL and get it, Noam Honig, Angular intro. And you'll later be able to step back here. Another topic is I can type pretty fast. So if you want me to write things down or gather some links or do some kind of document, just say so and I'll write some things here. Hey, Daniel, good to see you. And I'll write some things here and you'll have them as part of the repository. You'll be able to use them. So far, so good? Okay. So let's start with understanding what we've got here. In this folder, this is the Angular intro folder, we have all sorts of files. The root folder has all sorts of configuration files that I'm going to touch a little bit on, but actually the main one that I'm going to talk about is package.json. Package.json is a configuration files that tells Node.js what are the packages that I'm using in my project, okay? That way he knows to install them when I'm copying to another machine or doing something else. We have two types of dependencies. We have normal dependencies and dev dependencies. And another part of the package.json file is the scripts, where I can define useful scripts that I will use in my development, and Node will help me keep track of them and running them. In this case, I want to run the start script. So I will open the terminal by clicking Control' and say npm run start, where start is this script over here. When I do that, it will run the Angular CLI ng, ask me stupid questions that I'll skip, and start running the Angular development server. Okay. The Angular development server is a small web server that helps us in our development process. It displays the HTMLs as we're looking at them, and it responds to whenever we make a change to them. Okay, so the dev server is started, and I can open my browser in localhost 4200, and I have a small Angular app here. So far, so good? Cool. If you go back to the file structure, so we have these config files over here. Then we have the source folder, okay, which has a few more files like the styles, the CSS files that we'll use in our app, the index.html, which is the root HTML of the code. But most of the work is going to be done within the app folder. Let's go over to the app folder. And in here, we have these 4 files that are considered the app component. Okay. When we develop in Angular, the equivalent of a magic program is a component. Okay. And the component has 1 or more files. By default, it has 4. The TypeScript file, where we see the code, the logics that we want to look at. the HTML file where we write our markup code, the CSS file where we write our styling code, and the tests that we will ignore and not write in this session. So far, so good? So every component has these 4 files, or at least some of these 4 files. I'll go to the HTML part, and I'll just go and delete it. Okay, you can see that the browser immediately responded, and we have now a clear browser. And I can write a title here, Angular intro, and the browser responded. Cool. So the Angular CLI has a dev server that whenever we make a change to an HTML file and save it, refreshes the screen. So far, so good? Wait. Cleared the app HTML. Every one of these commits is immediately available to you on the web, so you can go and see and investigate and do whatever you want to do with those. Now, we want to create an application. If we go back to our README file, I want to create some routes. I want to create several pages and be able to navigate through them via a different URL. I'm going to have the home URL show me the home component, and the to-do URL show me the to-do component. Make sense? So to do that, we're going to use, again, the Angular CLI, and we'll ask him to do ng, which is Angular CLI, G for generate, C for component, home. And we get an error. Now, I'm getting this error because I'm using PowerShell, and for some reason, it doesn't want to do this because probably I have some kind of unauthorized access. You may get this on your machines as well. Since I don't care, I will say CMD because I'm old enough to know what DOS is. Switch to DOS, and then lives are easy. So ng gc home. Okay, Angular generate component home. When we run that, we'll be able to see that Angular has generated a folder called home, and in it, 4 files for the component: the code, the styling, the tests, and the HTML. Okay? And it did another thing. It updated the app module class. Let's look at that. Going to see it through the changes. This is the app module class. This is the definition of our module in Angular. Okay? Every component that we use, we need to register in the declarations. Okay? Think about it like the program repository in Magic. Okay? Every program exists in the program repository, every component exists in the declarations. Every external module that we want to use, we need to import in the imports section. Think about it like the component repository in Magic. It's fun how those two terms intersect. So when we added the home controller, the home component, sorry, hey, Keith is joining. When we added the home component, Angular has added it to the declarations here. Now, in terms of syntax in Angular, in order for me to use a task, it's actually syntax in TypeScript, I need to first import it. So I import the home component from this path and use it here. So far, so good? Cool. Save it as add the home component. And let's do the same for another component. Let's say nggc to do. Great. So again, we have the to-do folder, TypeScript, spec, HTML, CSS, and again, the app module has changed to add the to-do component and added it to the declaration sections. Cool. Okay, now the first and foremost usage of components, and actually one of the fun things about Angular, is as soon as we've added a component, we can start using it in our HTML. If you, for example, look at the home component, we can see that it has a selector called app home. Okay. Now we'll go to the app component HTML, where we can use like any normal HTML, like span, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But we can also use the app home. We can actually use our component in the HTML as if it was a native HTML command. Okay. So, and I can even use app to do. And it will show me the content of the to do component. Okay. It knows to do that because in the home component, sorry, the selector is app home. So he knows whenever I say the app home, to write this HTML in that place. Okay. And again, for the to-do component, just play with it. The to-do has the app to-do selector, which we've used in our app component HTML. And if I play with its HTML, it will refresh. Okay. So let's call this using components in the HTML. Let's recap what we've done. We simply added these lines in the HTML. Okay. And we saw that it affects. But that's not what we actually intended to do. We wanted to have different addresses for them. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. First of all, we'll delete what we've done. So it's a good place to start. Let's delete these lines. So clean up. And we want to map them to routes. In order to do that, we're going to go to the 6th file in our root folder. Remember, we had four files for the app component, one for the app module, and one for app routing. And in the app routing, we specify the different routes and how do they map to the components. So we have the routes array. I'm going to start a new line, open curly brackets, and say the path blank maps to the component home. And the path to do maps to the component to do. Does this make sense? Okay, we have an array with 2 elements in it that map the path to the component. So now we can see that home works. And if we'll do /todo, we can see that todo works. Okay. Home. Oh, sorry, blank and todo. Okay. Now in the app component, okay, in the app component HTML, we can see that the component itself gets generated into the router outlet. Okay, so if I'll do like before and after, you can see that they come before and after this. Make sense? Cool. And I also want to add navigation buttons. So let's go and say button home and button to do. And I'm going to say that, let's click enter here and say that we have a router link of / for the home and a router link of to do for the to do. So now when I click on home, it will go to home, and I click on to do, it will go to do. Cool. Great. So let's revisit what we've done here. I'm going to use the source control as a way to review everything. So we've added routes and navigation buttons. How did we do that? In the app routing module, we have registered the 2 components and their respective paths. Okay, that's how we've created the route. And in the app component HTML, we've added 2 buttons with the router link. So far, so good. Okay, cool. I'm syncing to the web, so if anyone want to get the changes, they can get them immediately. Yes, one more thing that I want to do. You may notice that the route says /todo or /. Now, in some servers, that may cause you a problem. Okay, I don't know how much you control the web server upon which you're going to deploy the application. But if you say /todo, it will first request the server to return the content of the to-do folder, and that may give you all sorts of pain. So if you are deploying to servers that you have little control of, I recommend that you use a different methodology for routing, which is called hash routing. I'll simply say comma, use hash. Okay, and that means that it will add this hash over here. Okay, that makes it easy to deploy to anywhere you want to go, because when you call the server, it will get this URL from the server, and Angular will take care of everything after the hash. Okay, so nice little trick, use hash. And again, we'll save it as use hash to avoid web server routing conflicts. Okay, great. So we've created some basic Angular code here, but I'm not going to win any beauty awards over what we've done so far. So I would like to start designing and making this look a little bit better. Now, designing web applications is designing to begin with is a pain. You know, I can't choose a colorful shirt, let alone design a web application. And even if you have a design for AI, it's way too complex to handle on a day-to-day basis. But fortunately, there are smarter people than us who've done that. Google have invested quite a lot of research into creating a UI theme called Material, where they have, Material, I think it's just Material, no? Yes, Material, which is, they set a set of design rules on how things should look to be beautiful, measured, like, I don't know what, all sorts of complex things that I don't get. And some people did us the favor of creating Angular components that actually does that, okay? So we're gonna use Material Angular IO, okay, components to design our application. There are quite a few components here, pretty cool. You can just take and use them. We don't need to pay anyone, open source, fun. There are even crazy things here like drag and drop, like, you know, doing things like this, or I actually like these kind of things. You can just take it and use it. And I'm going to show you how we use some of those in our demo today. So to get started, we're going to click on the Get Started button and install Material. So in our project, we're going to say ng add Angular Material. This will tell the Angular CLI to go and get Angular Material from the web and install it for us.
ng is a command from npm?
No, ng is a command from Angular CLI.
Thank you.
Okay. The first thing we've done was one of the first commands that we've ran was npm install Angular CLI. And the install -g told it to install it to our global scope. So after it has completed, the ng command became available to us.
Thanks.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for the question. Interactivity is important for me. Anyhow, so when we said ng add, it asked me a few questions. The first questions that it asked me is which color theme I would like to use. It comes with 4 built-in color themes, okay? But you can create your own later, so don't worry about being bound to only 4 color themes. And the color themes are indigo pink, deep purple, pink blue, and purple green. We can actually see them here in the material site. So indigo pink is the current style, deep purple amber is this style, pink blue gray is this horrible thing, and purple green is this horrible thing. I'm going to go for indigo pink. And I'm going to ask it to apply the typography rules. Yes, please. And browser animation. Yes, please. And it will do, again, the goal of the CLI is to update several files without me having to worry about them. Okay. Now, since we're using Git, we can see exactly what it has done. So let's review those. The first thing it did, it's added 2 packages to my package.json. Okay. 2 more things that we are dependent upon, Angular Material and Angular CDK. Great. The second thing is updated the Angular JSON to use the themes that we've asked for, the indigo pink CSS. Okay. Then it went and updated our styles. Okay, styles are a set of CSS rules. How much do you guys know about CSS, if at all? So. Okay. CSS rules control the way we style our application. We can define rules in the style CSS file. I can actually format here nicely. Basically, here we're saying we want to have the height 100%. We don't want to have 0 margin and use this font for the body. Okay. And it updated the index.html to have links to download the fonts and to apply the typography class. And last but not least, it updated our module with a module. Okay, loaded the browser animation module. So far, so good. So we'll approve these changes and commit. Great. Let's go ahead and run our application. npm run start. I'm going to close things here that we don't need anymore. Okay. So our app has started, and I don't know if you noticed, we've lost the margins. Previously, we had margins around the page. Now we've lost them. And that's because of what it said in style CSS, said margin 0. And it changed the font a little bit. Hard to notice, but it did that. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is have a nice little toolbar. So let's go to the Angular material component list and search for a beautiful toolbar. Probably in the letter T. Here we go. We have a toolbar. And we can click on it and we can see samples of toolbars. We can see the API documentation of toolbar, and we can see more samples of toolbar. I gotta say that I don't like the way the material docs look or operate. They are academic and not fun, but that's what we've got, and we need to use those. Now, whenever we want to use a component from Angular material, we're going to first of all need to import it into our app module. So if you want to use the toolbar, we'll go to the API tab and see that we need to import the toolbar module. Okay, so I'll go ahead and copy this, head over to our app module file, paste it, and import it in our imports. Okay. Once I do that, I can start using this component. And how would you use it? I will click on Overview, see an example that I like, ask to see the code, and just copy it. Okay. And in our app component.html, I will put this in the top and let us save and see what happens. I have a toolbar. Okay. It's gray, it's boring, but it's here. Now, I want to use a color for it. When you're designing using the material design scheme, you don't need to care about colors. You've chosen a scheme. Now you just need to select the proper color from the scheme. So I can say primary, and I'll get indigo, or I can say accent, and I'll get pink, because the schema that we chose was indigo pink. If I choose no color, I will get gray, or if I choose warn, I will get a warning color. Okay? So I'm going to go with primary. Okay, let's review what we've done. So to add a toolbar, we first, in the app module, imported the toolbar component and registered it in our imports. Okay, the imports, again, it's kind of the component repository in Magic. And in our HTML, we've added the toolbar. Okay? Cool. And actually, let's copy this text over there so it will make more sense. And do that correctly. Yay. So now our app has Angular intro, and we're happy with it. The next thing I want to work with is the buttons. I want to make the buttons look better. So I'm going to go to Material, Components, Buttons. I have all sorts of beautiful buttons here. I would say, okay, cool. Let's go ahead and take the module, go to our app module, import it, and add it to our imports. We're going to do this about 1 million times here. Met button module. And now we can go to the overview, look at the code, and see that we need to decorate it with met button. So I'll go to our app component HTML, take one of our buttons and decorate it. And we can see that it started to look like this. Okay, with an animation when we click it, kind of cool. Let's do the same to the second button. Okay, And I can take these two buttons and put them in the toolbar, and they will look like this. Okay. Because they're well integrated, the material UI theme took care of changing their colors in the right context and putting them in the right place. So again, let's recap what we've done. We've added a Met button module, and we've registered it here, and we've used it in our HTML by moving those two buttons into our Met toolbar and decorating them with the Met button directive, it's called. Okay, style the buttons. Cool. And the next thing I want to do, I want to change the back color of the page. So I'm going to go to styles. I have the body over here, and I can change the back color. I can do it red if I want, but I don't. So I'll do something, this is a kind of gray. Okay, you can see I have a nice little this that I can play with. Actually, I just want something simple. Okay. And another thing I want to do, I want to create a spacing between the Angular intro and these two buttons. Okay. So to do that, I will add a CSS class called spacer. So what is a CSS class? A CSS class is a collection or a group of properties, of style properties that I can change and apply just by using this name. Okay. So I can set here as many properties as I want, and to whichever element I will say class equals spacer will have these properties. Now I'm going to use something called flex 1 auto, and maybe someday we'll get a time to explain what this means. And I'll go back to my page, and after the title and before the buttons, I'm going to add a span and give it the class of spacer. Spacer is the name that I've used over here. Okay. And this will push them to the right. So quick recap. We've added a style called spacer. We changed the back color to light gray. We added a style called spacer. And in our own component, we put it between the title and the buttons to reach this separation. Styled it. And again, I'm syncing this to the web. So if any of you want to go and look at the repo as I go along, feel free to do that. Another thing we want to do, we want to design things in cards. Okay, so I'm going to go to the components, search for a card. A card is something like this. It's a little bit elevated. It has rounded edges to it. It has some spacing. Somebody spent a lot of time of energy designing that this is the thing we should do. So just like before, I'm going to copy the component, go to app module, import the component, mat card module. Okay, go to the code sample, look at it, see that I can just do that. And I'll go to the to-do component. Sorry, I'll go to the to-do component. And in its HTML, I'll say card. Okay, so now we have this card over here. Now, again, I don't know how many of you are experienced with web development, but just so you know, Chrome is amazing. And we can do quite a few cool things with it. So I'm going to use that a little bit now to demonstrate how I explore styles and do things with styles. I'll right-click on this card and say inspect.
The Bluetooth device is ready to pair.
Hello, Frederic, we can hear you.
Hi.
So I did right-click and said inspect, and it shows me that I'm currently inspecting the P, okay, that we're on. And I can scroll up to the card. So it's currently inspecting the card. And when I do that, I can see all sorts of properties here around it, including the style. And I can say here, margin 10 pixels, and we'll create a margin around it. Okay. And it is so sweet that I can actually click arrow up, and it will increase the margin. Arrow down will decrease the margin. So let's do, I don't know, 10 pixels. And then I can just, copy it because I'm too lazy to write and say here style, margin 10 pixels, and now it's in my code. Okay, so the Chrome is an amazing tool to explore styling and see what you can do with it. Strongly recommend playing with it. So we've added the card. And the next thing we're going to add is
Sorry,
a
no,
list.
what is the name of the tool? Are you saying home?
Chrome, sorry, Google Chrome,
Okay, thank you.
the browser. Okay. When I can go to every element, right click, inspect, and it will dive into it. You know, as a developer for many years, and I've used many tools, the depth of tools that exist in Chrome doesn't cease to amaze me. You know, you would think it's just a browser, but it's one of the most sophisticated ideas I've ever seen. Okay. So yes, right click, inspect. Next thing on my agenda, we want to have a list of to-do items. And again, I don't need to think how to design it. I'll go to Angular, Material, see if there's a list here somewhere. Yes, there is. Go to the list. As always, I need to remember to load the module. I'll put it here. Say mat list module. Okay, and then go here and copy the code and drop it in our to-do component, HTML. So now we have a list. Okay. Now I know that importing things into the app module seems tiresome, but you really need to do that the first time you work on the projects, you know. So at some point you're going to reuse elements. You're not going to use everything just once like I do now. So you import the list once and from there you use it. You import the card once and then you can use it a million places. So even though it's a bit tedious, it is what it is. If anyone wants to know why, you can remind me later and I'll explain. So added the list. Any questions so far?
You're doing great.
Thank you. So now we're coming to the more fun part for me, at least, which is code. You know, so far we've played with HTML and copy and paste, but now I want to write some logic and see how does that work with our HTML template. Before I do that, I have a question. How many of you have ever used Magic Merge? Okay, cool. So you're going to see stunning similarities between Angular 2022 to Magic Merge 1997. So brace yourselves. You know, I always give Magic the credit that Magic done web, how was it called? Web Online, right? Remember that technology?
Yep, way back when.
Back in 78, where Gil, I think, was the developer who wrote it, well before anyone could spell a single page application. So yeah, anyhow, so what I want to do next is take a look at our to-do.html. And here we have some strings that when we'll edit it, we can see that we can edit it, okay? But now I want to I wanted to put some logic over here, okay? So if I use curly brackets, double curly brackets, one might say double angular brackets, that's why Angular is called Angular, because of the angular brackets, and say here 6 times 7, it will give me the results, okay? So I can inject code into my HTML and it will get evaluated and recompute in real time just by putting it between 2 curly brackets or 2 angular brackets, okay? I can also define variables in my code. Let's say go to to-do component TS. Actually, let's talk about a second about the to-do component TS. Let's see what we have here. We have a class called to-do component, okay? The class starts in this curly bracket and ends in this curly bracket, okay? It has the constructor that gets executed when it gets created, okay? And it has the ng on init, which is a rough equivalent to task prefix, okay? And on top, it has some properties that describes it. It has the selector, the ones that we can use in the HTML when we want to refer to this component, where to find the HTML and where to file the style sheets. Okay, that's what we see in front of us. If I want to declare a local variable, I will just add a line and say title, that's the variable name, of type string equals the meaning of life. Okay? And if I want to use this in my UI, I'll go back to the HTML. I'll replace this with, again, brackets and say title. Okay. So it will take the content of the title variable and display it in this place in the code. So when you combine the two, you get a reference to a very nice old book. Okay. So this is called data binding or one-way binding, when we are binding data in the HTML from something that comes in our code. Okay, from the title member. Okay, let's recap what we've done here. In the code, we've added a variable called title of type string and placed this string as its value. And in the HTML, we just used curly brackets, double angular brackets to use it. Okay. In embedded data from code in our HTML. By the way, notice that at the bottom, it writes every shortcut that I click. So, if you want to see how did that happen, just look down quick enough or go back in the video later. Cool. Now, obviously a variable is nice, but we are here to write tasks and we want to have multiple tasks. As a magician, I would think of task as a table. Okay. As a developer, object-oriented developer, I would think of task as an object or as a data structure. Okay. So don't be alarmed by fancy words. Let's just give it a name. Interface task. It has a title of type string. And it has a completed of type Boolean. We are basically describing what does it mean to be a task. Okay. And then I want to have an array of tasks. So I will say here tasks of type task array is equal array. Let's revisit this. The variable is named tasks. It holds an array of type task, and it's currently empty. Okay. Let's add a task to it. I will open curly brackets and notice immediately that it's red because it tells me it's missing title and completed. Okay. So TypeScript is amazing. It helps me not to make mistakes. So I'm going to say title equal a learn TypeScript. Okay, and completed equals false or colon false actually. So now I have one item in the array. Okay. And this is again a good time to look at the Angular utilities, Angular developer tools. I'm going to switch over to console. And in the ng on init or task prefixes, you may call it, I will say console log this.tasks. And it will run it into my debugger and I can go ahead and look at it. Okay, which is kind of nice. And I can say even better, console.table tasks, and it will write it as a table, which I think is cool. Okay. Let's go ahead and add another one. Title, learn HTML. And let's say, I don't know, title, learn basic English. And I think I've managed to complete that. Okay. So I have 3 items in my array. Okay. 2 tasks are complete and are incomplete and 1 is complete. Cool. And again, using the developer tools of Chrome, which you can use, by the way, to hack any website. It's kind of cool. I can right click on this array and say, store object as global variable, which will give me it here as temp1. So I can do temp1.length, and it will tell me its length. I can do temp1.0, it will give me the first member, or 0.title, and it will give me the text of the first member, or the second member, or the third member. Okay. The in-browser console is an amazing tool to just play around with JavaScript. Whenever something doesn't make sense, I go here, hit it back and forth until I get the result that I want. Okay. I can do temp1.length. Okay. Yay. Cool. So I have the array, I have it working. Now let's use the array in the UI. So let's go back to our HTML, and we have 3 entries of mat list. And we actually want to take just one of those and duplicate it according to the number of elements I have in my array, right? Now for a magician or a magic magician, this would be a mg repeat, right? So in Angular, the equivalent of mg repeat is mg4. Let task of tasks, okay? So for every task in tasks, right now it will write 1 because that's what I left here. 1, 1, 1, okay? And then I can replace it with task.title. Okay, that's the equivalent of mg_title in Magic Merge. But this is live recomputing, yeah, of course, it's not just server-side rendering. And let's say here also task.completed, semicolon, done. Else, I don't know, not done. Okay.
What's the significance of the asterisk in front of NG4?
The asterisk in front of NG4 indicates to Angular that this is a structural operator. Okay, which means that it manipulates the DOM around it. Okay, it duplicates this DOM element. Like anything else almost just changes values. This one actually creates DOM elements.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, and don't take me, I'm not a big expert on that. It just makes sense to me. Do read more about it. I just know that that's the way to do it. So, I take it at face value. But I think they're used for NG4 and NG-if. These are the most places where we've used the asterisk. Okay, so you see that I can put a value from a column, and you can see that I can even put a computed value. Like say, hey, if the task is completed, write done, otherwise write not done. Okay, this is very close in syntax to the magic if. If, then, else. Okay, cool. So far so good. Let's revisit what we've done so far. So in our to-do component, we created an array. We created a data structure. We created an array with some values, and we've written it in the ng-on-init to the console, so we can play with it. And here in our HTML, we replace the 3 entries with 1 entry and an ng4 to duplicate it. This is a good place for questions so far.
Hello. Yeah, miss. Baruch Hashem. I'm right now on a Zoom meeting here. So okay. I just saw your name.
I'm guessing these are not questions for me, Isaac. Okay, cool. So added an array of tasks, okay, and used it in our HTML. This is what I call great service. Perfect. What's next on our agenda? The next thing I want to do is indicate visually. Isaac, can you put yourself on? Actually, I can put him on mute, right?
Sure, just
okay, Isaac. Oh, yeah, mute. Found it. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is to create some kind of visual indication whether or not the task is completed. Okay, so let's go again to Angular Material, because whenever we think visual, we go to Angular Material. And we have options here, so you choose. We can either use a checkbox or we can use a slide toggle. Any votes? Anyone? Come on, someone have an opinion.
Let's use a slider.
Let's use a slider. Yeah, I thought so too. So I'll go to slider. And just as before, I'm going to copy the module, import it to the app module. And in our imports, great. And when we'll go to our to do.html, let's add for every item in the list a math slide toggle, place this inside, and now we have this nice little slider. And when we want to bind its value, we're going to say checked equals task completed. Okay. So far, so good. Now let's talk a little bit, because there is a bit of subtlety here. Whenever we inject HTML or inject data into our HTML, we use the double curly brackets. Okay. Whenever we want to use an expression for a property, we will use square brackets around the property and express the expression here. Okay. So if I'm looking at what I've written here, I can write it in a different syntax by saying checked equals curly bracket, task completed. Okay. And it's essentially the same, but it's considered less flexible and less performant and less secure. Okay. So instead of doing this, which for me was the intuition, whenever we want to bind a property to a code, to an expression, we use the square brackets. Okay. Cool. The next thing that we wanted to look at is, notice it how when I change this, this doesn't get recompute. Why is that? Because currently we have only done one-way binding. We've done binding from our code to our HTML. Everything that we've done so far signifies one-way binding. Now we want to bind back. We want to have two-way binding. We want to have the slide toggle attached to the model of task completed. Does that make sense? So to do that, surprisingly enough, we're going to load another module called a Angular forms module. Forms module. This one comes from Angular and not from Angular material. Okay, this is from the core Angular. So now in our to-do component, instead of saying checked between square brackets, I'm going to say square brackets, normal brackets, and ng model. Okay, so square brackets is one-way binding from the code to the UI. Square brackets and normal brackets means two-way binding. Okay, cool. So now when we do that, we're going to see recompute. Cool. Great. So let's recap. We've loaded two modules, the slide toggle module and the forms module. Okay. And in our HTML, we've added the slide toggle and we've bound it using two-way binding with the square brackets and normal brackets. Cool. So added the slider and got it to work. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay.
And basically you're saying that Angular is like a magic engine for the browser.
Yeah.
In terms of inits and recomputes.
Yeah. That's why I think Angular is perfect for magicians, because it recomputes. If you look at the history of things, we had magic who's done recompute back in the previous century or millennia, and then we had pretty much silence on recompute all the way through 2010. And in 2010, Knockout.js came out and introduced recompute for web, which was amazing. And then Angular.js came out to introduce the same concept. And somewhere in the middle, a small company did recompute in .NET, but we're not going to talk about that. But yeah, Angular does recompute and it's beautiful. And currently I'm working with several UI frameworks. So Angular does recompute and Vue does recompute. React, surprisingly enough, does not React, which is kind of, how would you say it? Not as advertised. React does not react to recompute, but it has other things. Okay, but this is really why I think Angular is a great match for a magician and the way a magician thinks. Okay, so the next thing I want to do here is I want to be able to type in a new task, okay, because we want to do some more things. So again, surprisingly enough, I want to have a UI element, so I'll go to Angular material, and I think I would like to have an input. There's probably one over here. And there's pretty cool inputs here, and we can look at different types of input. They've done a pretty good job on it. So let's go ahead and take the input module, go to our app module and import it. That input module, and go and copy some code. And go back to our to-do component and place that code here at the top. Now let's clean it up a bit. Let's take away the class because I don't use it. Let's make the label a new task title. Let's remove the placeholder and value. So we have a nice little input here. I love it that when you park on it, it like animates out and in. Okay, and I never wanted to know how to do that, and I'm happy that someone else did it for me. Just in general, when we're looking at inputs, there are several appearances. You're currently seeing the fill appearance. I like the outline appearance, which goes like this, but that's just the way I like things. There's also a standard appearance that is white without the filled background. Whatever gets you going. And just like we've bound the slider to our test completed, we want to bind our input to the title, okay? The title variables that we have in our code to this variable, okay? So to do that, I'm going to use square brackets, rounded brackets, normal brackets, ng model equals title, okay? So you see how immediately I see in the input the meaning of life, and I can say here, hello world, and you can see how it updates immediately. Perfect two-way binding between the input and the code, okay? And I'll go over to my code, clear this so we won't just create tasks like this. And let's add an add button. So first I create an add method, okay? That will be called from the HTML in a second. And I'll say, well, when the user wants to add, please go to the tasks array and push into it a new task with the title of this title and completed false. So what am I saying here? Go to the tasks, this one, push an entry to it, okay? This is its title and completed false. And the title is based on these titles, which means this references the one over here. Make sense? Okay. And in our UI, I'll go ahead and add a button. Say mat button, add, and then I'll say brackets click equals save. It's not, sorry, save, add. Okay. So now, if I'll say go to vacation, click add, it will add it to the array. Okay. And also, after I add, it makes sense to clear the title. So I'm going to say title equals blank. Okay, so I'm going to say go to vacation, add, one more thing, add. This is okay. Okay. Cool. Let's recap. what have we done? In the app module, we've loaded the input module. In our to-do, we have cleared the title and we've added the add button that pushes to the array a new member with title according to the titles that was typed and completed equals false, and have reset the title field. Okay, and in our HTML, we've just added the input over here. Okay, now actually let's delete this line because we don't need it anymore. We know the meaning of life. And I want to talk just a little bit more about the subtleties here. It took me quite a long time to figure those out. So remember, curly brackets is embed code in content. Okay. Square brackets, when we use them, was one-way binding from the code to an HTML property. Okay. Square brackets and normal brackets is a two-way binding. Okay. And brackets means binding from the UI to the code. When the user clicks add in the UI, it triggers something in the code. That's why it's called, that's why it has a normal brackets. Okay? Does this make sense? So if you think about it, this is a combination of code to UI and UI to code. If code to UI is square brackets and UI to code is normal brackets, two-way binding is square and normal brackets. Meaningful? Hope so. Perfect. One more thing. No, actually, that's okay. Let's add this for now. Allowed to add tasks. Great. One more thing. Anyone who came from Magic, we've seen Magic Merge. We've seen how we merge a value. We've seen how we do repeat. The next important thing is how do we condition something? Let's say that we want to have the add button not appear. Okay. If we don't have text. That makes sense? So I can go to the button and say star ngIf equals title length greater than 0. Okay, so we can see now that the button doesn't appear. Okay, but if I start typing, it will appear. When I delete it, it will disappear. Okay. And actually, let's do this. Okay, just remember another idea. Let's see if it works for me. Just format this and add here. Disabled if title length is less than 4. Let's say that I don't want to have too short tasks. Okay. So when there is no task at all, the button doesn't appear. When there is a task, but not long enough, the button is disabled. And when it's long enough, it becomes enabled. Cool? Okay. So I'm going to again talk about the binding. We have this to represent code injection or injection of content into our HTML. We have square brackets to bind logic to a property. We have normal brackets to bind logic to an event that happens from the UI, to push from the UI to the code. And we have the combination of them to have two-way binding. Okay, so a quick recap. We've added an if condition to condition the appearance of the button, and we've added a conditional property. Okay, so if our text is too short, the button will be disabled. In terms, by the way, of UI handling, I prefer disabled to disappearing, but ngIf does have its value. The if and property binding. Okay, so we're making nice progress, I think. At least I think so. Let's do a few more. How are you guys holding up? You're still with me?
We're good.
Okay, cool. So let's do a few more things. Let's add a delete button. And before I'll add a delete button, let's actually do some theoretical things. So you see here we have the array. And I can right click on it and say store object as global variable. And then I get temp1. And we've done that before, and now I can play with it. I can say temp1 dot length, and I'll get that. Okay. Now, actually, an array in JavaScript is amazing, and it can do wonderful things. I can say, for example, dot filter, okay, and only refer to completed, okay, and length. And show me there's only one completed task in the array. How does that work? I say filter, and I give him the filter rule, the condition, okay? The condition will get a task and needs to return true or false, okay? So the task completed is a very easy filter. I can say filter where task dot title dot length is greater than 5, then all of them match, and greater than 10, just 2 of them match, and greater than 15, still 2 of them match, and greater than 20, none of them match, okay? I define the rule, and I send the rule as a parameter to the filter method, okay? Cool. Now you can learn a lot about it in the W3C array tutorials. Search JavaScript array over Google. You'll see a ton of tutorials in that, so you don't really need me. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that as my way of deleting tasks. Okay? I'm going to say create a new array without the tasks that I want to delete. Does that make sense? So let's do that. Let's go to the to-do component. Let's say delete task to delete of type task. So we created a delete task method, okay? And we are sending it a parameter of which task do we want to delete, okay? And then I'll say this dot tasks equal this dot tasks dot filter, where the task is different than the task to delete. Let's look again. I'm saying create a new list of tasks that's different than the task that I want to delete, and place it in tasks. Okay. And if I'll go over to my HTML, now I can add a button here. Say delete, and delete task, and send it the task. Okay. So now I can delete tasks. Okay. Let's recap. So in order to delete the tasks, in our code, I created the delete task method that receives the task to delete as a parameter and creates a new array, okay, without the task that I have deleted. And in our HTML, I've added the button to delete. Whenever it's clicked, it calls the delete method that we've just talked about and send it the task in my loop, which is the task that I want to delete. So far, so good? Cool.
Yep.
Great. Next,
I think one thing that we're seeing is that a bit like the key to success in Magic is that you have to think in a magic way. So there's definitely an element of thinking in an angular way that at the moment feels alien to me that I haven't got. So maybe towards the end you can come to how do I learn to think angular? And as Joe said in one of the questions, what are the best resources to do that? Okay.
It's actually, I haven't looked at the question tab. So thanks for mentioning that it exists. Yes, I'll talk a little bit about that, although I don't have a magical answer to that. You know, it's just banging at it until you get it. I think that's the way it worked for me. I think the best places I've learned was in Pluralsight, which is everybody know Pluralsight? It's just like Udemy, but older for older people like me. So I think that's a good place. And I think there's another website, I'll remember his name in a second, with great tutorials. He sends me an email every week, and it's a website where you have a video tutorial where you can edit the code that the video presenter done. So it's really good, but I'll think about it in a second. I'll remember it. But hey, I've been training developers for years. I've been training Magic developers. I've been migrating Magic developers to .NET developers and take them those forward. And I got to tell you that the basic thinking as a Magic developer makes sense. Okay. You just need to translate the terms a little bit, and you can be a great .NET developer, and you can be a great TypeScript developer. Okay, because we think in terms of reuse, we think in terms of design, and we pre-compute very easily. Recompute sounds to us like something that should come out of the box and does do that in Angular. So here it's just a little bit of syntax, but it can serve you very well. Now, for me, once I've done the comparison between an Angular component and a Magic program, I said, okay, that makes sense to me. ng on init is the task prefix. I get that, okay? And once I've done the comparison between a table to an interface or a data structure, like we've done over here, that just did it for me, okay? So, okay, this is like a table definition with these two columns. What about indexes? I don't care, okay? And filter is the range in record main. I'll take it, okay? So I think that we don't need to be completely foreign. We just need to create some kind of things that jump around in our head, just find the similarities, try to find the common denominators, because the thinking itself is right. Okay. Unfortunately, there is no call program in terms of calling another UI, but even for that, you can do that with dialogues and material and stuff, and we'll go back to that later. So I'll tell you what, I want to circle back to the question. Soon we're going to have a few minutes to wait for something. So I'll go back to that later. I just want to do a few more things, and then I'll touch the questions when we have a little bit of time. Okay. Cool. So let's just style this a little quick. I want to have icons for add and delete. Okay. So just like anything else, you can see where I'm going. I'm going to go here. I'm going to search for icons. And I'm going to import the icon module. Module, import icon module. Okay. And once I've got that, I can start using icons. So let's go to our to-do. Let's take our add button. Instead of being a met button, I'll make it a met icon button. And I'll say met icon add. Okay, so now it has a plus. Okay, and I'll do the same for the delete. And met icon delete. And says that the button is a met icon button. And I've got this delete over here. And I don't know if you remember the spaces that we had before. Let's put it outside the slide. It doesn't make sense inside the slide. And then I can use the spam class spacer. Remember that one from the start? So now I got those aligned to the right. Okay. Now there's a great resource to find these icons, which I thought would be quick to find in Google, but it wasn't as quick as I wanted it. So you should search for Google font. And here you have a nice tab called icons. And here you can search, delete. Okay, and it gives you a set of buttons you can use. Okay, and it has really hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of icons to whatever you can imagine. All of these are free for you to use. They're free for you to search and do whatever you want with them. So if I'll go and say here, let's say, is anything cooler for remove and delete? I don't know. Let's take this one. So I click it. It gives me the text to copy. I wonder if it's this one or another one. Let's see. I'll go back to my code, place it here, and I got this icon. Okay. So remember to search in Google Fonts, tab icon, and then you can get access to all of these icons. So let's recap what we've done. And we're close to a break, so don't worry, guys. We've added the icon module and imported it. And in our HTML, we've just added the usage of the icons. Okay? Cool. So now I'm going to do something that I think is interesting. At least I was excited when I saw it for the first time. So far, every time that we refresh, we start from scratch. Okay? What if we want to store this? Okay? So storing on the server is beyond today's meeting. We're already an hour and a half in. But the browser is amazing. And the browser means to store things. So let's get ahead and store this in our browser. So let's go to our to-do module. Go ahead.
What is the name of the report?
Sorry, repeat.
What?
Can you repeat the question?
Okay. It's on the database 23.
So try writing it down. Your microphone isn't clear.
It's called DB Supplier.
DB Supplier?
Okay.
No, I'm doing.
I think he's speaking to something else, to someone
else. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So please mute. Thanks, Daniel. Okay. So let's say that we want to store this somewhere. The browser has great storage capabilities. So let's go to our to-do component and let's add a method called save. And we'll save it to the local storage. We're going to set an item with the key of tasks and set it to JSON stringify these.tasks. So what have we done? Okay, I'm going to mute this friend. So local storage set item task JSON stringify this task. This task is our array, right? That's clear. JSON stringify takes this array and turns it into a string that we can store, that we can stand, that we can do whatever we want to it. Okay? So it converts our table into a string representations that we can use. Let's call it in several places. So let's call it when we add and when we save. No, sorry. And when we delete. And also when we change this slider. So we're going to go to our slider and say, when you change, please save. Make sense? Okay. Now to view this storage, again, Chrome is amazing. We'll go to the application tab. Okay, local storage. And we can see here that it creates an item with the key of tasks. And we can see the values here. Okay. So as I change that, we can see that it recomputes immediately. Learn to store in the browser. Okay, plus we can see that it's stored. Okay, so welcome to offline web applications. You can create a web application with a local database and live happily ever after. Who needs a database? Who needs a server? This is Magic 4.2 Bitrev back the powers that I used to have in the 90s of writing my own apps and solving my own problems without servers and database and DBAs and whatever. So this is very powerful and very useful and I think very easy to use. All that is left is actually to load it when we load the task. Okay. So we'll go back to our code, to the ng on init, or task prefix as we call it in Magic. And we're going to say const tasks as string equals local storage get item tasks. Okay, this will return this value over here. Okay, yes, works with any browser. It's part of the standard. Even on TV browsers, this would work. Okay. And then I'll say if there is a value in the tasks as string, then set these tasks into a JSON.parse of tasks as string. Okay, so you see now when I reload, I get these values
Where does he store?
in the browser. Literally here, in this place. It's somewhere where the browser decides to store it. Every browser implements it differently. Okay, you cannot fully trust it because I can be, a horrible person and go here and change something. I can go and edit this string and say la la la. And when I refresh, I will get this string as la la la. Okay, so you cannot trust it in 100%, but you can solve that with all sorts of other stuff. Okay. Yeah, it's not a Chromium-based browser. Greg's here. I'm not enough of an expert to distinguish, but Safari, Firefox, hell, anything, even Edge, of course, but even Internet Explorer used to support this, but we don't speak of it anymore. It's the browser whose name cannot be mentioned. So far, so good? Okay, so I'm just gonna add two more quick things just because I'm greedy. I know I should have finished by now, but just because I'm greedy, I want to add two more things. So let's first of all recap. So to save, we've added a save method, and we said to local storage set an item of tasks with JSON stringify of tasks. Okay. To load, we said read a string from the local storage, and if there is a string, update the task with that result, with the parse of that result, convert the string to a JSON, that's JSON parse. And we've added a save that we've called the save after the add and after the delete, and from the HTML after the change of the slider. Cool? Okay. Added save to browser local storage. Just a few more things because we love recompute. So let's do two more things. Let's go to the app, to the to-do HTML. And let's say that we have here a total, say div. Total tasks dot length. Okay, so we have total 4 tasks. Okay, and let's add the completed. And in our code, we'll say get completed and return this dot tasks dot filter task completed dot length. Let's revisit this sentence again. We've played with it when we've done the delete earlier, but just revisit this again. Go to the task, filter the task where the task is completed. Okay, and return the result array and give me its length. Okay, so in the UI, we can go and say completed, get completed. How do you call it? Get completed. Yes, and it all recomputes. Cool. Cool. So okay, done some statistics. Great. Now let's talk about deployment, because we've written a wonderful website, which is extremely useful and we love it. But now we need to get the most annoying thing in software, which is called users. So let's see, how do we deploy this to users? I'm going to go back to the package JSON. And remember, the package JSON has a script section. And one of the items in this section is called build, which basically says angular.build, ng-build. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it. Let's open another terminal and say npm run build. It builds. It takes it a few seconds. Cool. And what it did was it built it into a folder called dist. Okay. And in the dist, there's another folder called Angular intro, and in it we have these files. Okay. What actually they do here, Angular CLI, they've took the time to make sure that our deployment will be ideal. So they've taken all the JavaScript that we've written and all the JavaScript that we've used and bundled it into one JavaScript that is not readable. Okay, it looks like this, but it works, so we don't care. Okay, and this one and this one. And even the styles, they went and bundled it all together. They took the styles from us and for material and everything that we've used, and they've created small files that are fast to download, optimized to read. Beautiful, okay? And in the index.html, they've taken our index.html from before and added to it a section to load all of these elements. And they use a random number over here. It's not exactly random, a hash number over here. So if we will update a version, all of you who've written Magic with JavaScript, and one of the pains is that you've updated the version, but the JavaScript file stayed the same and it was cached, and I'm using an old JavaScript file. It creates a hash code over here that will make sure that the new and up-to-date version will be loaded. Nothing will be cached. Okay? Or at least it will be cached as long as it didn't change. Does that make sense? Cool. Now, I'm gonna piggyback off the most cheap hosting service you've ever found. I'm gonna go to, wait for it. Where is my origins? Remotes. Open repository and remote. So this is our repository on GitHub. First of all, you are welcome to come here. You see the README and some links that I've put in. You can see all of our commits and review them step by step and learn from them. Okay, this is all live from our demo. But I'm going to go to the settings tab and go to something called pages and tell him, hey, get your pages from the master branch from the docs folder. Okay, so GitHub has a built-in hosting that you can use, okay, and that I use for many different projects that I create. All I need to tell him is where to take the actual HTML files from. So I'm going to tell him, take it from my master branch from the docs folder. So far, so good. And as I go to our code, I will change our build command, okay, as following. I will tell it output path docs, which means when you build to the folder docs, the letter GitHub will use to read. Okay, and also please use the base href to be /Angular intro. Why am I doing that? So far, when we worked, we were the root folder. But when we'll go to GitHub, we'll be under a folder called Angular intro. Okay, our virtual directory, Angular intro. And I want Angular to make sure that this will work. So I tell him, when you build, put it here and use this virtual directory reference. Okay? Cool. Now I'll say npm run build. Okay, and we can see now that it is created the docs folder with, again, those JavaScripts and index file inside it. Okay, and I'll say deploy, and I'll sync it to the server. And now it is uploading to the server. And it's on the server now. Now, unfortunately, GitHub are fast, but not fast enough. So if we look now here, in our code section, we can see that we have an environment that has a failure in it. Okay, and we'll just refresh this every minute or two until it says success, and then we will have a website. I think this is a good time to talk about the questions. So let me revert to the written questions, and then we'll get some oral questions. Can you see my chat? Can you see this? Can everybody see the chat on the screen? Is it? I don't know if Zoom shares it. Okay, perfect. So Git repo is here. Home, boom, nice. Can you recommend a resource for developing Angular things like this was that? I gotta say, what you got today is my interpretation of this after rendering hundreds of docs and seeing hundreds of videos. And I never felt anyone explained it that clearly to me. That square brackets means code to UI, and brackets means UI to code, and the combination of them means two-way binding. I never found anyone who simplified it that well for me. So, that's my accumulation of the knowledge that I had. There are great resources out there. Fireship, I always nice tutorials, and I have a complete blackout about the site that I was talking about. But I'll figure it out. I'll get back to you on that. Thank you. Node.js or can community other ways to the server. Okay, so the Angular dev server uses Node.js, but just for development. When you deploy Angular, it's just static files. It's HTML and JavaScript. Okay, it doesn't need anything. It's just the browser, simple HTML and JavaScript files, and you can communicate to any server any way you like it. Okay. Syntax is very similar to Vue. That's actually an interesting point. The way I see it, Angular is on one end, React is on the other end, and Vue is somewhere in the middle. And I don't know if you know, I'm actually waiting to see this. There is a YouTube Vue document. Here it is. Vue documentary. This is a documentary about the guy who created Vue. Okay. I want to see it. I only got 5 minutes out of it, but I really want to see it. I scheduled some time with my wife. Hopefully she let me. And one of the things that they're saying here, that someone told me at least that they're saying here, is that Vue came at a point in time where AngularJS, the previous version of Angular, died. The new version was too early and too immature, and React was too complicated. So Vue had the right timing and just came in. So yeah, syntax is very similar to Vue. If you ask my opinion about choosing UI frameworks, let me know. I can speak about it for a few minutes if you ever care, but I won't waste your time right now. How much gets done when converting a magic application? I would ask converting to what? When converting to .NET, I have a lot to say, but I won't put it here now. But if you want to ask, I'll be happy to explain later. Works with any browser, Firefox, yes, of course. Yes, of course. One more thing, two more things. Thank you. I use the one more thing way too often. I apologize. Visual Studio are using, and does it matter for Angular development or with using it? I'm using Visual Studio Code. Okay, it's an open source version of Visual Studio, which is great. Netscape, I don't think so actually, but it's I do miss it. I used to love that little N with the phone next to it. Actually, if you care about curiosities about software, there's a big discussion in software between rewrite or migrate. When you have a long legacy application and you want to move to a new technology, should you rewrite it or migrate your code or evolve, evolution versus revolution? And Netscape is one very interesting case studies about that. So find that if you care. Yeah, I like Vue. I'll be happy to do the same tutorial on, actually, Craig, if you'll be happy to do the same tutorial on Vue, I think it would be great. I would come and attend. If you need the same tutorial on React, I think I can do a React one that does pretty much what I've done here now. If you ever want to compare how a simple to-do app is done on all three technologies. Okay, now I think that was enough time for it to refresh. So let's see. Yay, Vue deployment. And this is where I say dope. What did I miss? Okay, this is how you see it's a live demo. I don't know what I missed. It should have worked. Console. Okay, network. Let's see. Let's see how I debug this. So he was trying to take runtime from Noam Honig runtime EDF. Okay, and not from the correct directory. Okay, and even though the source said the right thing, let's look again at my build code and see what I've done wrong. Base href. Yeah, I forgot the slash at the end. Okay. npm run build. Please don't forget the slash at the end. Okay. So let's let it build again. You see how it deletes the previous version and generates a new version. Cool. You can see the changes here. Just change this little slash over here. That's all we needed. So fixed deploy and push. And it's syncing. And now we're going to need to wait for our page to show us another delivery. So good time for question, guys. Any questions? Okay, so I think Craig has written here that our goal is walk the path of magic web client and these Angular fundamentals in a prelude to that, not in opposition. It's complementary knowledge. My English is not sophisticated enough to take prelude correctly. But Magic Web Client is something that I think Yuval Asheri can elaborate on. I'm obviously not a fan, but I'm guessing you all can understand why. But that's just me, you know. Anyone else? Any other questions? Help me buy time.
Is the current generation of single page applications, you know, Ember and Angular, React, Vue, are these eventually going to get outpaced by WebAssembly frameworks?
That's a very interesting discussion that's currently going on. Wow, it's such a long answer to answer. So here it is. JavaScript was never intended to be what it became. It was really a joke. It was always a joke. Okay, nobody ever intended it to become this big. But then suddenly someone woke up one morning and said, hey, I only know JavaScript. I want to write a server, and created Node.js, which now allows to writing JavaScript on the server. And pretty much any technology out there runs JavaScript natively. Like, you know, my toy robot can run JavaScript. Okay, so that's kind of amazing. And it's actually the new assembly. It runs everywhere. WebAssembly is cool and growing. You know, natively for me, it would be the easy solution because I'm a C# developer. You know, Magic2.NET is what I do, and Razor and WebAssembly seems like a great idea. Also, the developer behind Razor is Steven Sanderson. Is the developer of Knockout, the original recompute for web. He's a great, smart guy. But I think that there are some apps who would benefit and some that would not. It wouldn't completely replace it. Okay, WebAssembly requires a bigger download, requires some specialties, focuses you mostly on C# at the end of the day because these are the only ones who invested in it. I think JavaScript is here to stay for the foreseeable future. Okay, everything came and went, but I think it's going to be here for the foreseeable future. And let's see if we have our website, because I really want to go out with a bang. Not again.
I mean, for what it's worth, I have actually started studying some Blazor courses on Pluralsight. It's really interesting technology. And in some ways, it's a bit like, it's almost like choosing a religion. It's you kind of bet your life on a belief system. Having been burned with like Adobe Flex and Silverlight, all of these things where you can invest a lot of time, energy, money, and then they die. I think that's one of the things that we have to give credit to Magic for. It's just been around forever and
didn't die yet.
It will be around forever.
I wished it to them. I'm just going to stop this discussion for just 1 second because you guys, this is the web version working on the browser, and I want to show you something that is cool. Would you mind taking out your phones and reading this QR?
Got it. Very nice.
Okay, so now all of you have an offline phone to do app where you can manage your to-do items and enjoy it. So this shows you how we managed within an hour and 45 minutes to develop an Angular app that uses a local storage database deployed to your phones, running in production for free. I think that's one of the wonderful worlds of web these days. And Mike, if I want to circle back to what you said, JavaScript is just very present and probably going to stay here for a while. WebAssembly is still, Razor and stuff is still niche. It's not widely adopted. It's promising. And it brings the promise of single code base between backend and frontend. Okay, it's something I want to talk about a little bit. I hate duplicate code. In Magic, I hated it. In .NET, I hated it. And in the web, I hated it. And when you develop a frontend or you develop an app for the web, when you, by definition, have a frontend and a backend, the duplication of code there is something that I find hideous. I have a required name validation done both on the frontend and on the backend. So that's something that I don't like. Razor and WebAssembly gives a promise of maybe solving that, but also TypeScript in the browser and TypeScript in the server using Node.js as the server also bring the promise of doing that. I actually started an open source project called Remalt, which you can see over here, that takes you through the way I would like to program, which means have the same code base and same code definitions, both on the front end and on the back end. It uses it has tutorials both for React and Angular, but it also supports Vue, of course, either front end or use those for the front end and use a Node as the back end. And it supports many databases like Postgres, MySQL, MongoDB, SQLite, Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, JSON file, and also front-end database like the front-end SQL or front-end local storage. So this is a library I'm working on for pure TypeScript, Node.js, JavaScript development that gives you that power of writing your code once and using one language, both for the front end and for the back end. You guys are welcome to go here and try its tutorial. Maybe I'll record a video of it someday like I've done with ours now. If you want to see a tutorial of Remalt one day, just let Craig know and I'll be happy to show you that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. I'm just happy that eventually I'm in production. This works. Yes, I want to show you just how powerful this kind of things here. So just like you, I'm a magician at heart. And I started with, I don't know how you guys started with Magic. I started because I'm lazy. Okay, my main motivation in life is lazy. Someone gives me a job to do and I write code to do it instead of me. There's a story about me in the late 90s where I had a girlfriend and I wrote some code to send her attention SMSs because she said I didn't invest enough attention in her. And when she found out and she was angry, I said, but if I was a painter and I would paint you a painting, you would love it. Why don't you love my code that sends you attention SMSs? But she didn't like it. Anyhow, lazy is my motivation. And that's how I started writing code with Magic. And I loved it in the 90s where I could write code to solve problems. And I felt that as time went by, it became more complicated, blah, 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 blah. But now in the web, I also want to have that capability of writing code to solve problems. So I'm just telling you about the projects that I've done in the last few years. I ended up somehow creating code for NGOs by mistake. It again started with my wife sending me on a route to distribute food parcels to the poor here in Netanya. And I got lost and I said, some software has to solve it. Doesn't make sense that I'll go with a node trying to find addresses in parts of town that you don't want to get lost in. And I ended up writing the Hagai food distribution app. And this is Angular. It's all written in Angular. And it has a list of families. Okay, and it has a list of active deliveries and can display them on a map. And here we go. I've put it in, where am I? Johannesburg. I think I have a US demo that will make more sense to most of you. Yes. So we have volunteer tracking, we have distribution map. Here I am somewhere around Cleveland. We can see the different recipients of the food parcels. And the main idea of it runs both on a desktop and on a mobile. So it can look pretty good on a mobile. at least what I think is reasonably good on a mobile. And you have a volunteer who comes in. You can select a volunteer, assign them parcels. Okay, it will choose the closest families one to another. Okay, show them on a map. Plan the correct route using Google route optimization. And for every one of these, and send an SMS to the volunteer. Let me simulate that. Create a new tab, open new incognito tab. So the volunteer and his phone get this. And yeah, they don't use my password, but okay. The normal volunteer doesn't need a password. Let me just again go here to my families. And no, so it was Amir and it wasn't, yeah. I should have done this with one of you. More volunteers. Let's go to, I don't know, Shlomo, whoever it is. So let's go and see how he gets it. And he gets a list like this on his phone. He can see a map. He can click on every one of those. Click here to navigate to them. It will open Google Maps to navigate. Click to call. Reports they've delivered the parcel. And this is like a pet project that I've created. And during COVID, it exploded. Like back in 2019, we have delivered 17,000 packages in 2019. And after COVID, in 2020, we've delivered 500,000 packages using this app. And 400 and something thousand in 2021. It's used in Israel, South Africa, Australia, and the US. And it's tremendous fun to do it. And what I'm trying to say here is this uses Angular, uses Node.js on the server. I'm running on servers that cost me $16 a month. Okay, I'm distributing 500,000 food parcels on servers that cost me $16 a month. And I find that amazing. I feel empowered again, like I was with a bootlegged version of Magic in the 90s. Cool. Questions, anything, anyone? Okay, so thank you guys for staying with me for almost a full 2 hours. I know it was promised, it was advertised as 1 hour, but I really couldn't get it all done in 1 hour. If you like this session, do share, like, send text, SMS, email. All of you have my emails, of course. If you want more sessions like this, let Craig know. He can get things done. So I think that would be a good way forward. Craig, back to you.
I'm just really grateful for your time and expertise today. I'm at the beginning of learning Angular. A lot of things are intimidating about it. I've watched a couple of videos, courses, luminaries like John Papa. I got to say, I learned more today in a more structured way than I have anywhere else. You did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I've repeated this tutorial like 5 times in the last 2 days to make sure that it all is coherent. And I'm really happy you guys enjoyed it. I'm also happy to see here some friends from the past, from previous lives, from different endeavors that I've done. Some I've met back when, I think Yuval Asheri is here, and there's always the nice story when he left Magic Support and I left Magic Support. Remember that day? Well, I worked in Magic Support in 1998, 1999, and I left Magic, and he left to become a product manager 22 years ago. And we both got presents to, we did a party to leave, and we both got present. So he got a big desk calendar, and I got a small desk calendar. And that indicated not exactly where we stood in life at that point. So yeah, that's one of those good old stories from back in the day, and really some very familiar faces here. Guys, it's been a pleasure, and I'm available if you have questions, if you want to send me an email or anything. It will be fun. And have a wonderful weekend. And Craig, let me know when the video is, so I'll be happy to share it as well.
Will do. Again, thank you. That was great.
Thanks, Noam.
See you guys next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.